Chapter 1612 Absolute Beginnings Soul Consciousness. Chapter 1612 Absolute Beginnings Soul Consciousness. __. The thick smell of blood stormed into people's nostrils while pieces of bleeding meat that even had dragon veins and tendons were now moving in Shi Yang's body, bringing him thick life energy like a flood. Drops of blood with magical energy mitted into Shi Yang's body and blood, augmenting his life form. A pleasure he couldn't describe arose in his heart, making his pores open joyfully. No. The absolute beginning creature Yuan with his serpent head and turtle body roared indignantly and hopelessly when he saw Shi Yang swallow the meat blocks from Desolate. Looking at his satisfied face and blood trickling down his mouth, Yuan was so angry that he thought he could explode at any moment now. The Chaos Water Soul Bead was created from Yuan's soul, blood, soul consciousness, God power, and Power Upanishad. It was Yuan's last resort. As he used it to hit Desolate hard, he hoped to explode Desolate's body and seize the chance to eat his flesh and recover. He couldn't believe that the fruits of his labor were plundered right in front of him. If his soul altar weren't confined by Sauron, he would destroy Shi Yang even if he had to kill himself in doing that. Rumble. 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 Desolate's billions of miles-long body resounded with millions of thunderclaps while his eyes rolled as he roared and howled crazily. All of a sudden, his dragon tail, which no one knew where it had reached, sprang back with a horrendously brutal power. The dragon tail was like a massive rod that whipped Shi Yang's ferocious giant body hard. The sharp and tough spikes on Shi Yang's body were broken under that whip. Shi Yang's absolute beginning body was blown into the dark and deep void, bleeding severely. Crack, crack, crack. His bones cracked, making people frightened. His extremely tenacious body had almost shattered. Shi Yang spurted a mouthful of blood, which then turned into a dark blood orb in front of him. The energy moved inside that blood orb was terrifying. As he was falling, his eyes had many space cracks in front of it. It seemed a hand had grabbed the blood orb that flew out of his body, pulling it back to him and disappearing into his body inaudibly like a drop of water merging with the sea. All of you have to turn into dust here. No one can escape alive. Desolate's bellow shook the sky, echoing in every corner of the world. He had thrown himself into a brutal frenzy as his giant body twisting terrifyingly. Countless dragon scales rattled strangely like the sounds of wind blowing through a forest with a rhythm. Countless horrible wounds on his body closed quickly while his blood ran backward into his body, leaving no drops outside. Instantly, Desolate had returned to his supreme condition without a scratch. Seeing this, Sauron panicked. His thumb had exploded, and the roulette of fate flew away uncontrollably to hit the string of fate with all of his power. At the same time, Shi Yang, Yuan, Han Tian, and Serene Prison had joined hands to form an invincible force, but they still couldn't kill Desolate. At that moment, Shi Yang's absolute beginning body was struck to the void below, and Yuan was wounded terrifyingly, almost draining his whole energy to fight. Serene Prison, Han Tian, Rupert, Montesi, and the others, whose soul altars were controlled, had also perished. To himself, because of this formidable hit, his power was reduced greatly. It seemed as if Desolate didn't bear any attack. A reluctant desperation arose in Sauron's heart uncontrollably. Looking at Desolate's mighty dragon form, he felt hopeless, as if Desolate was unbeatable, and would stay invincible forever. As soon as this thought churned in him, he was dispirited as if he had lost his faith in his victory. This had also weakened his aura. "You're scared now?" Many halos radiated from Desolate's dragon scales with different bright colors, including sparkling gold, white silver, deep blue, lime, red-orange, and others. The solemn, divine halos covered him as his dragon eyes observed around, looking at Sauron, his voice sounding cold. "Do you think you can control my soul fate when you have my string of fate and kill me? With only your power? Harumph. Compared to Hui and Devour, your realm and power aren't inferior. However, you don't have a powerful body. You want to build your own world with that fragile body? Are you sleep-talking?" Then, Desolate opened his dragon mouth, in which light rolled and gathered, shooting like formidable artillery. A dazzling light column that could erase all kinds of creatures' marks in this world shone on Sauron. Sauron was frightened as if his life had come to an end. Green veins bulged and twitched on his forehead. He shivered as if he would turn into ashes in the next moment, and his existence would vanish shortly. That light column covered millions of miles, and was moving at a breakneck speed. Sauron could only endure it, not having enough time to dodge. Yuan was exhausted. Since he had wiggled to vie for Desolate's meet with Shi Yang, he was away from Sauron. Sauron couldn't use Yuan to shield this attack. Hence, Sauron forced himself to be sober. One hand of his held the scriptures of fate and the other hand pulled the roulette of fate. He was ready to risk his life at this moment. The dazzling light column shone with the power that could erase all creatures in this world, carrying the intimidation of the overlord of this universe. If Desolate pumped his soul power into this attack, it would be enough to burn more than 10 territory ancestors into ashes. All of a sudden, a massive tower with millions of shining absolute beginning symbols emerged from the void. An ivory sea of life congregated under the tower, pouring the immense vitality into it. A human figure slowly appeared under the tower. It was Shi Yang's life clone. The harsh light shone, and many absolute beginning symbols on the tower turned into ashes, smoking up. Ice freeze! Mai Ji suddenly screamed, and the tower was frozen instantly, being covered in layers of ice. As soon as the ice appeared, the light melted it. However, more and more cold energy was congregating, freezing the power Upanishad symbol tower to defend it. Sauron was surprised just when he had prepared to die. Seeing Shi Yang and Mai Ji, the latter seeming like an ice goddess, he couldn't react. However, in this moment, another Shi Yang came from a far distance with a starry sky. The immense but mysterious aura of the everlasting stars filled the void. The sea of stars plunged, shelling so many stars on the giant dragon. "You want to die?" Desolate roared outrageously as the stars in the sky bombarded him. His giant body struggled hard, trying to crush Shi Yang's two clones. "Hey, I'm here." Zi Yarrow's charming voice arose and a large purple dot swelled up, turning into the 12-headed heavenly snake. Her human clone sat on the head of the main body, using her power Upanishad. Countless bands of auspicious light arose from the snakeheads, moving breathtakingly. They turned into beautiful rainbows, winding around Desolate like a rope net which slowed down his struggling body. "Ha! You're finally here. We should finish the grudge between us." Desolate was tied by the rainbows. Although he was wiggling hard, his voice was strangely calm. "Sauron, I helped you shield that lethal attack. Why are you standing idle? Try your best to control his soul fate." Shi Yang's life clone and star clone shouted in unison. Afterward, the two clones turned into two jets of light, diving directly into the void underneath to reunite with the host body. Sauron restored his sound mind shortly. He frowned at the two descending lights while talking. "I don't need you to teach me." Then, he controlled Yuan's soul fate first, making him drag his wounded body toward him. It was to shield him at any minute. Taking a deep breath, Sauron stabilized his emotions and then extended his finger, trying to tie down Desolate's string of fate. However, in this moment, a doubt arose in his mind. Shi Yang's absolute beginning body wasn't fragile, but he had appeared like that when he was blown down there after one hit of Desolate. He hadn't reappeared, it seemed abnormal. With that thought, he didn't confine Desolate instantly. Seeing Desolate and Zi Yarrow attacking each other and unable to spend more efforts to do anything else, Sauron decided to sneak away, getting to the sea of consciousness underneath. Yuan was forced to follow him. Shortly afterward, he and Yuan had pierced through the conjoint area between the two tiers to got deeper down. In his vision came massive, ash-gray air masses which were moving like tornadoes. Emotions like fear, anger, joy, and many thoughts he couldn't name came from those tornadoes. There were billions of air masses like this, and they looked like massive lakes. Is it his soul consciousness? As soon as Sauron got in here, he was bewildered. Hesitated for a while, he came near an air mass, using his soul consciousness to check. Many images, vague and clear, flooded in. They looked like someone's life experiences. Sauron could even see scenes of battle, encounters with other creatures, and some familiar landscapes. Images crossed and paused at a scene where he saw Shi Yang. Shi Yang's star energy bloomed, filling the star power Upanishad origin. It's Fan de Lei's memory. Fan de Lei's dead. Why is his memories here? He perished utterly, didn't he? Sauron was shaken hard and felt awkward. He didn't mind Shi Yang anymore, staying here to sense around. Unexpectedly, Ferrell, Neptune, Yerberg, and even some of the memories of his peers who had been dead for tens of thousands of years, were found here. However, all of the images here were just simple memories without a soul. This is absolute beginning's sea of consciousness. There are countless grey air masses, trillions of them. But, are they all just the simple wisps of memories? It should be absolute beginning's soul consciousness. But, why did absolute beginning's soul consciousness have the memories of the deceased? Sauron shivered while talking to himself, his face baffled. Because their souls were born because of him. The creatures' souls are the memories, the wisps of complicated soul consciousness in this sea of consciousness. Different soul consciousness and the soul energy in his soul pond can create new creatures. Taking the Phantom clan for example, after Phantom died, her wisps of soul consciousness and memories returned to this place, fusing with the soul pond. New creatures were born with the foundation of the passed-away creatures, and they went on like that all the time. It's not the end when the soul vanishes. What were erased were only the soul seals. The remnants of soul consciousness and memories would come to this place. In different masses, the memories and thoughts would gather with the soul energy to give birth to new creatures in every corner of the universe, every planet. It's like that. Yuan hovered by Sauron. As he was the expert that had lived through 2 eras, he suddenly understood the situation, telling Sauron his guess. Chapter 1613 Origin of Life. Chapter 1613 Origin of Life. __. Among millions of races and trillions of creatures, not many could witness the changes of time where gods were buried and creatures were born like Yuan did. After the absolute beginning era ended, the brutes like Desolate, Devour, and Hui had gone dormant, and didn't have a chance to witness the changes of time. They didn't know about the mysterious, magical features of the new lives. However, Yuan, the coward who had hidden away, had experienced the ups and downs of an entire epoch. A long while ago, he had always thought about how the new species were born, and decided to observe the Phantom clan during their history. He could feel the similar aura and shape of Phantom from the Phantom clan's fellows. However, he remembered clearly that Phantom was gone even before the absolute beginning era ended. He was one of the experts who witnessed Phantom's soul vanishing. Then why did the Phantom clan in this new era have a similar aura, body, and even life energy fluctuation? Moreover, it didn't happen only to the Phantom clan. The members of the mysterious Sky clan, Black Demon clan, Ancient Monster clan also had the traces of the absolute beginning creatures more or less. There were so many signs that proved the mysterious link between the new species in the new era with absolute beginning creatures. This doubt had troubled his mind for a long time. He didn't know the truth after so many years of investigating and observing, since he didn't have explicit proof. That was until today, getting into absolute beginning's sea of consciousness and seeing so many grey tornadoes, he saw the images of memories and soul consciousness, and finally understood the truth. Every creature was originated from absolute beginning. Their souls, lives, and bodies used to be parts of absolute beginning. When they died, their soul seals broke, and their soul consciousness and memories would return to this place, becoming absolute beginning's soul consciousness. The soul consciousness fused with the pure soul energy from the soul pond in this place could create new species and creatures in every corner of the universe. It was an unceasing cycle of life. You mean our souls, bodies, life seals, and everything came from him? Sauron was stunned, looking at Yuan with a frightened face. Just like the creatures in our territory that we can use our soul consciousness and power to create, we were created by him in the same way. We used to be part of him. Yuan was so exhausted, his giant body shivering and his voice sounding gloomy. If so, when our time ends and every creature dies, we will become absolute beginning's wisps of soul consciousness and memory here. Then, fusing with the soul energy in the soul pond, we will return to different territories to become new species. The races to be born in the next era will be born by the destruction of this era, cried Sauron. The truth shouldn't be much different, Yuan confirmed. They then quieted down. The earth-shaking roaring and the terrifying explosions of the impact in the tier of power Upanishads above their heads became furious all of a sudden. Sauron pulled himself together, getting rid of his puzzled state. He reminded himself of his priority. Not good. Seems like desolate and who we want to get here, too. Find the soul pond first. Shi Yang must have seized the chance to find the soul pond. Then, he controlled the roulette of fate, forcing Yuan to transform into his human form and departing while releasing their soul consciousness to search. However, as soon as his soul consciousness appeared in this area, he was shaken hard. His head was filled with strange, buzzing noises. Many complicated images of different creatures were shattered, flooding his head. He was stuck, and couldn't sense anything else. Sauron felt his soul consciousness not being clear anymore, everything seeming stagnant. Getting frightened, he hurried to retrieve his soul consciousness and didn't dare to search recklessly anymore. While Sauron pulled Yuan around to find Shi Yang and Absolute Beginning's soul pond, Desolate became restless and hot-tempered in the tier of power Upanishads. Zi Yarrow had turned into a 12-headed heavenly snake, using the divine light to create bands of rainbows. Her holy energy filled the void, creating nets, rattans, and snakes that coiled around Desolate's dragon body, trying to keep him in the tier of power Upanishads. After fusing with the ice power Upanishad origin, Mai Ji's realm and power had increased greatly. Like an ice sculpture, she used the power of the power Upanishad origin to raise extremely cold storms and use her freezing energy to freeze Desolate's flesh body, preventing him from gathering any energy. They were trying their best to seize more time for Shi Yang. Desolate finally recognized this, and consequently became so indignant that he felt like tearing everything. If Devour were here, you guys could join hands to trouble me. Unfortunately, he's not here. This kid's too weak. Heaven dragons bursting blood. Desolate's giant body suddenly detached as if a sharp weapon had just cut him into pieces. However, each cross-section was smooth and shed no blood. Boom, boom, boom. Thick electric beams shot from his cut bodies formidably. All of a sudden, his broken bodies gathered and twisted into smaller wild dragons. The dragons had different colors, representing different power Upanishads. The gold dragons cultivated metal power, the cyan dragons had lightning power, the white dragons cultivated water power, the yellow-brown dragons had the power of earth, and the flaming dragons and the wind dragons obviously cultivated fire and wind powers. Desolate's detached body had turned into several thousand wild dragons instantly. With that, they immediately got rid of Zi Yarrow's restraint. However, they didn't mind Zi Yarrow and Mai Ji, rolling and swimming toward Absolute Beginning's sea of consciousness like a cloud of heavenly dragons from the dragon world. He knew Mai Ji and Zi Yarrow's plan, so he didn't want to waste more time. He had to force Shi Yang to get out and not give the latter a chance to take the soul pond. At his moment, Sauron and Desolate had the same idea. Everything had to be done for Absolute Beginning's soul pond. Not good. After Desolate got rid of them, Zi Yarrow's face changed as she screamed. After a whole era of staying idle, he's not hot-tempered anymore. I didn't expect that he does think but fight rashly. At this moment, Shi Yang's body doesn't have enough power. He's not Desolate's equal opponent. If Desolate gets the soul pond, no one can escape alive. In the next moment, Zi Yarrow's 12-headed snake turned into 12 magnificent rainbow bands, retrieving her auspicious sunset clouds in the sky and heading toward the sea of consciousness underneath. You're not strong enough. You can't force yourself. Otherwise, you will be killed soon. When Shi Yang and I fight him, you can seize the chance to attack, but don't face him directly. Your body's too fragile, and you can't resist even one hit. Before they left, she advised Mai Ji to be cautious. Thank you, Jejia, I understand. Mai Ji hesitated for a while but still answered nicely. Rolling grey air masses were scattered in the sea of consciousness which had no restriction or boundary. Strange emotions of creatures filled the place, making people stagnant altogether with their energy upon arriving here. Deep inside the grey masses of dust lay a clear pond, hovering inside the vortex of clouds. A strange soul magnetic field that could shake people's hearts hovered above the lake. It made all creatures emotional, forcing them to kneel and bow instinctively. Waves of soul energy attracted creatures' thoughts, making them proactively release their soul pond to worship that lake. By the lake and the strange soul magnetic field, a figure was struggling hard to back off, his face pale. It was Shi Yang. As his star clone and life clone shared the same cognition, before they came to him, they had worked with Mai Ji and Zi Yarrow, asking them to join hands with Sauron and Yuan to hold Desolate off for a while. In the best case, they could tie Desolate down to gain more time for Shi Yang. As a result, Shi Yang had time to get to Absolute Beginning's soul pond. The star clone and the life clone had tried their best to hinder Sauron. But Shi Yang then asked them to take the chance and run away discreetly to merge with the host body. As Shi Yang's host body had the space power Upanishad origin, he was familiar with the open space of the Sea of Consciousness, and got to the soul pond quickly. After the host body got the star clone and the life clone, his competence had skyrocketed sharply, his energy and realm expanding on a large scale. While his confidence increased, he wanted to take Absolute Beginning's soul pond as Desolate was temporarily held back. However, at the moment his host body arrived at this place, he discolored in fright as soon as he urged his soul altar. The soul magnetic field from Absolute Beginning's soul pond was a strange but irresistible power. The soul pond didn't ripple, but in this vast sea of consciousness, the grey clouds and wisps of soul consciousness moved as if they had a soul controlling them. The entire tier of sea of consciousness trembled slightly. As he had just fused with the space power Upanishad origin, he could use the space energy to cover the entire place. That was how he perceived the strange commotion. He suddenly thought that this sea of consciousness seemed to have a soul and will. An unpredictably domineering creature, for some reason, was about to wake up. As soon as this thought arose, he found his soul, will, soul altar, and even the soul pond become restless as they were sucked, being pulled toward the lake. It was the first time he was so frightened that he had to gather all of his power, using his Absolute Beginning body, urging the life, space, and star power Upanishad to retreat. Step by step, he was leaving the lake as far as possible. It is. Sensing for a while, he suddenly got a strange idea, which sent shivers down his spine. The universe collapsed, and billions of creatures died in countless territories. Han Tien, Montesi, Rupert, and all the experts who got into this place perished. So many pieces of memories had turned into soul consciousness and gathered here. All this had brought a great change to this sea of consciousness. Absolute Beginning was about to wake up. Could it be? He felt anxiously restless. While trying to move backward, he crazily sent the message to the evil clone. Found you. However, at this moment, a several thousand meters long flaming dragon came and transformed into Ghost Hunter's humanoid body. He watched Shi Yang and then the lake, changing his face. What are you afraid of? More and more dragons came from the sky like meteors, falling on Ghost Hunter's head and entering his body. He was gathering his body. Chapter 1614, Power of Natural Law and Order. Chapter 1614, Power of Natural Law and Order. __. What are you afraid of? Long dragons with different energies rained like a meteor shower, getting into Desolate's head. Energies with different attributes gathered as his detached bodies congregated. But still he didn't dare to act rashly. He slightly lengthened the distance from Shi Yang, his face serious. Apparently, Shi Yang was too close to Absolute Beginning's soul pond, but he didn't jump into there to gather the soul energy. Instead, he was backing off continually, his expression looking strange. Rumble. 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 Sauron controlled the roulette of fate, bringing Yuan forward. They finally got to this place, emerging on a corner of the clear soul pond. In the sky, bright bands of rainbows crossed the void as Zi Yarrow's snake body meandered and descended. All the experts that had left the tier of power Upanishads were now landing in the sea of consciousness, and all of them, including Sauron, Zi Yarrow, Mai Ji, Desolate, and Shi Yang, had at least one power Upanishad origin. It seemed as if fusing with a power Upanishad origin was the requirement to enter the sea of consciousness. Absolute Beginning's soul pond was clear and pure, without a single ripple. From the soul pond as the center, the tornadoes of soul consciousness extended endlessly and unceasingly. The experts scattered around the soul pond, and they all felt that strange soul magnetic field coming from that absolute beginning's soul pond. This kind of a mysterious and bizarre magnetic field had frightened them. They all felt a fear as they were instigated to get into the soul pond, merging themselves with it. Everybody came here to take the soul pond, but when they finally arrived, they were filled with fear. No one got the guts to step forward. Shiyang, what's going on? Zi Yarrow retrieved her brilliant divine light, her beautiful body covered in bands of rainbows. She looked both elegant and holy, an entity no one dared to trespass. She nodded to Mai Ji, who looked like an ice goddess, and the latter understood the situation and retreated behind Zi Yarrow. Desolate wore a cold face, indifferently watching Mai Ji and Zi Yarrow. He didn't stop them, anyway. Sauron was holding the scriptures of fate with both hands, sweat beading his forehead and his face aghast. Yuan stood beside him, using Yuan Zu's human form. He also looked fearful. Shiyang stepped backward, discreetly assessing the others. He found Sauron and Yuan appearing strange. After pondering, he hissed, "You two, stay away from Absolute Beginning's soul pond. Back off." Sauron and Yuan were shaken. They were puzzled when they looked at him. Deep in their eyes, grey fibers were gathering. A feeling of something being very wrong churned in his heart as Shiyang cried, "The Absolute Beginning's sea of consciousness is gathering pieces of memory. The more it collects, the bigger the picture of its broken memory will become. It's like jigsaw puzzle pieces. When the memories gathered sufficiently, Absolute Beginning's consciousness will possibly be recovered, and it will wake up." Hearing him, everybody was petrified. Even Desolate had to change his face. Sauron was bewildered. As he was about to reply, he clutched his head while screaming. The scriptures of fate fell off his hands as blood oozed from his fingertips, which looked really strange. "There's something trying to capture my soul, a wisp of consciousness I can't resist." He's right. Sauron was scared and panicked. He bit the tip of his tongue to wake his mind using the pain. The ring finger and the pinky finger on his left hand exploded at the same time, and a terrifying energy that could resist fate arose from his body. He and his roulette of fate got hit hard by some invisible force. With blood all over his body, he was pushed backward. The scriptures of fate got bloodstains from his exploded fingers, turning into a jet of bloodlight and falling into his hand. Almost at the same time, a flow of consciousness that was unimaginably strong came, shadowing and attacking everybody's inner world and sea of consciousness. Divine lights shot out of Shiyang, Zi Yarrow, and Mai Ji's eyes. They paled as they hurriedly and crazily urged their powers, trying their best to resist that flow of consciousness. At this moment, all of them were sober enough to confirm Shiyang's assumption. To get through the Absolute Beginning gateway, Sauron had done everything to provoke the race war in the universe, boiling the creatures. Many races were erased during the war, so many territories and masses of the Sea of Stars exploded, and the life stars disintegrated into ashes. Even the domineering clans like the Black Demon Clan, Ancient Monster Clan, Soul Clan, and Devouring Clan were eradicated while countless experts were gone. The memories and soul consciousness of those deceased gathered here, in Absolute Beginning's sea of consciousness. Slowly, Absolute Beginning's soul consciousness was recovered, becoming more complete. In the tier of power Upanishads, as Han Tien, Serene Prison, Rupert, Zhanar Yu, Fan De Lei, and the others died, Absolute Beginning's soul consciousness was recovered faster. The more experts died, the more grey tornadoes were created, and were the important requirement of waking up Absolute Beginning. When Absolute Beginning's soul consciousness had gathered to a specific level, Absolute Beginning's terrifying consciousness could reach the limit, and it looked as if it could wake up soon. That earth-shaking consciousness was the thought that Absolute Beginning could use to sweep away the entire world. Shiyang, Zi Yarrow, Mai Ji, Sauron, and Yuan could feel deeply how domineering that wisp of consciousness was. It sent them a clear message, to enter the Absolute Beginning's soul pond. Mai Ji's struggling countenance changed. Being the expert with the lowest realm here, she gave up the first. With a blank face, she approached the clear soul pond. Her charming face slowly turned into a beam. Gradually, she had a wonderful feeling as if she was going home to jump into her mother's embrace. Among this crowd, Yuan was the expert at the Absolute Beginning era with a tough will. Sauron was the peerless expert of the new era, his mind also being strong. Although they were affected by the intimidating consciousness, they were trying their best to resist. They gritted their teeth, holding on like a mountain. Shi Yang was like a comet that had appeared during the recent 1,000 years, and his origin was more mysterious than any other creature's. His soul didn't belong to this universe, so he could wiggle out of the natural principle and order here. He was the only one who wasn't affected by the overbearing consciousness, and he even had the power to counterattack. In heaven or on earth, from every direction in this universe, no one can overwhelm or dominate my spirit, my will. Shi Yang was crazily roaring and howling at the void. At the moment, everybody was motionless, but he could move freely. He bolted toward Mai Ji, grabbing her and retreating. After each step he made, his entire body shook as his soul altar was filled with billions of indignant screams and cries. Horrible cracks and cuts started to appear on his tenacious body. "Come here!" Shi Yang roared as if he was ordering the heaven and earth. Inside the tier of power Upanishads above their heads, Shi Yang's evil clone was howling and bellowing. With the dark and demonic air twirling around him, the most terrifying, bloodthirsty aura diffused out, as if he wanted to destroy the entire world. Meanwhile, he dove rashly. "Boop! Boop!" Shi Yang's host body had his bones cracked as blood shot away from the wounds that looked as though they were created by sharp sabers. He had to counter absolute beginnings while bringing Mai Ji, slowly backing off in pain. Previously, he had consumed a lot of energy to make his body leave the absolute beginnings soul pond. And at this moment, he had to bring Mai Ji, who was now a wooden puppet, and resist absolute beginnings will at the same time. Plus, he had to use his power to stand the effect of the soul magnetic field. Thus, he had to hurt himself, burning his energy and blood to get further away from the soul pond. Other than him, none of the intimidating experts like Desolate, Zi Yarrow, Sauron, and Yuan could move. They were born in this world, and they used to be little pieces of absolute beginning's soul and body. When absolute beginning woke up, he would control all natural principles and orders, which would be fatal for Zi Yarrow and Desolate. As they could resist the order and maintain their consciousness, not walking toward absolute beginning's soul pond, it was enough to prove how strong they were. "Here I come!" The dark, demonic air came from the sky as the evil clone descended. He grinned, and a black light beam appeared on his forehead, turning into the devouring black hole in just a split second. The black hole looked like the mouth of a giant demon, screeching and whining as it attacked Sauron and Yuan. Sauron and Yuan were scared out of their wits. In this moment, absolute beginnings will had intruded them, so it wasn't easy to keep their minds from collapsing. And now, as Shi Yang's evil clone attacked them, they were hopeless. "If we die, he will wake up." "No!" Sauron bellowed frantically. "In this universe, no matter who kills you, you will help him grow. But only me, when I swallow you, it won't increase his power. Because in this world, my soul has the same position as his. After I have swallowed and digested you, you will become the energy to strengthen my territory. You will not transmigrate in this universe anymore." Shi Yang and the evil clone shouted in unison, watching the other two. In this moment, a riddle that had troubled him for years was solved. Why was his territory different from anyone else's? He had met many experts, and he knew that the territories of the territory ancestors with different power Upanishads would be different. It could be a world of water, heaven flame or magma, desert or glacier, and even something like the desolate territory, which was just a magical land that was similar to a natural territory. No territory looked like his, which was immense and mysterious like a cosmic realm, an independent universe. His territory had countless planets, with mountain ranges, lakes, deserts, open land, and 4 seasons, natural wonders which could give birth to magical creatures. His territory wasn't different from a real universe, so it was different from everyone else's. It was because all mighty creatures in this universe were affected by absolute beginning's mark, and were born with a restriction. No matter how strong they were, their territory was just a territory within the cosmos absolute beginning had created. The restriction in their souls made their territory dependent on this universe forever. If this universe came to an end, the territory of the domineering creatures like Desolate, Zi Yarrow, and Yuan would be shattered and vanished altogether. No matter what, their territories were part of this cosmos, and they couldn't get out to exist independently. Shi Yang was the only exception. Although his soul was weak at first, it was at the same echelon as absolute beginning, and the latter couldn't restrict it. Thus, his territory was an independent one that didn't have a connection with the universe where he was. That was why it was vast and mysterious, like a brand new cosmos he had created. His difference came from his soul, which gave him a better start than anyone else. Chapter 16:15 Awakening. Chapter 16:15 Awakening. __. Shi Yang held my ji and backed off from Absolute Beginning's soul pond while trying his best to resist the soul invasion in his brain. A flow of soul consciousness that was as strong as a massive lightning bolt twisted in his sea of consciousness, carrying an unimaginably magical power that dispersed Shi Yang's wisps of soul consciousness like a wind blowing away some smoke. That terrifying flow of consciousness slowly approached his soul pond to destroy it. Shi Yang's soul consciousness gathered, creating a star shield, space barriers, and using the immense life energy to resist that lightning bolt. He had created layers of barriers, restrictions, and formations to stop that attack. At the same time, the evil clone was using the devouring power Upanishad, opening a massive black hole to swallow Sauron and Yuan. At that moment, Desolate couldn't move, his cold eyes glaring at Shi Yang's two clones. Zi Yarrow looked anxious as she wanted to help the latter, but as she was controlled by the power of natural rule and principle, she couldn't use her power and help him escape. No! Sauron cried hoarsely, his body cracking and bleeding terrifyingly, his face grimaced. The roulette of fate underneath him turned into a ring one more time, which he grabbed and slid on his finger. While shivering, he was about to urge the power of fate when his soul trembled hard all of a sudden. Flows of pure, sweet energy flowed like rivers into his sea of consciousness, and the massive consciousness that had controlled him disappeared. The power of the power Upanishad origin he had taken and the soul pond in his sea of consciousness were rocketed instantly. Sauron's power was increasing several times at an amazing speed. What? The evil clone screamed in fear while squinting as bloody islands flew out of his glabella. The sinister, bloodthirsty aura was emitted rumblingly, filling the void as the 8 evil powers were urged. Kill. Sauron made some magical hand seals, pushing hard on a page of the scriptures of fate and pressing on Yuan's grey string of fate. The exhausted Yuan had also been released from the attack of the consciousness. At that moment, he was gifted with a mysterious power just like Sauron that he couldn't explain. As Yuan's power was increased, he got the spirit and hope to control the situation. Although Desolate and Zi Yarrow couldn't move, they still got the situation. They cried, and their eyes immediately went to the soul pond. They were sensitive enough to recognize that the Absolute Beginning's soul pond was smaller. It seemed like some of the pure soul fluid was gone, which had resized the pond. Linking it to Sauron and Yuan suddenly having their power skyrocket, they knew where the energy had gone almost immediately. But, why did Absolute Beginning want to help Sauron and Yuan? To help Sauron and Yuan resist Shi Yang? That was it. Yuan faced the sky, roaring indignantly while his human body was swelling like an inflating balloon. Soon, he had turned into his Absolute Beginning form of a turtle with a serpent head. As soon as his true form emerged, the power of the water power Upanishad origin was released. Right in front of the black hole cast by the evil clone, a deep rolling sea was created. The sea seethed with high waves, and the seawater here was Yuan's god power and soul power, which was the purest form of energy and had a tenacious defensive ability. Sauron's power was also advanced. Holding the scriptures of fate and stepping on the roulette of fate, his face was cold and dark as he spoke. Why did you attack us? You're easy to kill. The evil clone grinned fiendishly as a brutal and murderous aura shot up into the sky, seeming like it could bury the good thoughts of billions of creatures. This brutal, overbearing aura was even one level higher than Devour's. Haha, do you think you can stop me? The evil clone screamed, also transforming into the Absolute Beginning body in a blink. It was a giant body which was similar to the host body with scale armor, sharp and tough spikes on the shoulders, elbows, and knees, saber-like fingernails, and broad bone wings. However, the body the evil clone had created had blood-red hair, each hair as big as an arm. With a closer look, they looked like tens of thousands of bizarre tentacles that wiggled in the air with the terrifying aura of death, despair, and destruction. It imitated Devour's body, indeed. On top of that, this absolute beginning body had black skin and blood-dripping eyes. The murderous aura from him seemed able to represent all devils, demons, and monsters in this world, looking extremely malicious. It was completely different from the host body. Swish. Yuan's sea created by his water power Upanishad was torn apart as if it was a sheet of fabric. The evil clone with saber-like fingernails strode with a demonic and monstrous chi. Wherever he went past, all the light was swallowed and replaced by the thick darkness, where people couldn't even see their own fingers. Yuan and Sauron were swallowed by the endless darkness immediately. They didn't see a beam of light, and their soul consciousness felt like they were wandering in a jet-black sea that hindered all of their senses. This evil clone had swallowed Devour and obtained the devouring power Upanishad origin together with the evil heart. He had actually collected all the evil and cruel fixations in this world, and now, he was the king of the devils, the ancestor of evil gods, the precursor of giant monsters who had condensed all the evil thoughts, the malignant inner worlds, desires of killing, frenzy, and fear from all creatures. Even if absolute beginning helps you, you can't do anything. You can't run away. Shi Yang's evil clone's harsh and crazy laughter arose in the endless darkness, which reverberated in the minds of every creature in the cosmos. In the big territories out there, many warriors were at their critical moment of breaking through to the next realm. All of a sudden, they heard evil sounds that invaded their souls. They then fell into bedevilment, some even had their soul altar exploding to death. Many spirit animals that were naive in their nature suddenly burst out crazily, their bloodthirsty instinct triggered. On many planets, the animals began to attack each other as if they were all in a frenzy. Even the modest mortals felt hot-tempered and heavy, wanting to vent their evil heart out. Shi Yang's evil clone's laughter arose from this place to every part of the universe, affecting the feelings of countless creatures by releasing the inner demons inside each of them. The higher realm the warriors had, the stronger the effects on them were. Many incipient God realm experts were shaken hard. After vomiting blood, they had to try their best to calm down and refine the evil thought in their heads. Swish. Meanwhile, Shi Yang's host body had finally brought Mai Ji away from the soul pond. As they were far enough from the pond, she slowly regained her consciousness. I won't cause more trouble for you. After Mai Ji got her cognition back, she frowned, trying to urge her icy power. Layers of ice covered her body entirely, creating a massive glacier. She had used the glacier to seal herself, her soul altar frozen as well. If someone could get into her head, they would see her entire sea of consciousness, soul pond, the tier of power Upanishad, her territory, and her soul all being frozen. This self-sealing was the strongest defense of the ice power Upanishad, the absolute freezing. With that, a bone-chilling cold emitted from her. Shi Yang was surprised at first, but then appraised her for her intelligence. He immediately left Mai Ji, as he needed to get into that endless darkness and gather with his clone. He had to swallow and refine Sauron and Yuan first. As he was walking, his body grew into the absolute beginning body, which was similar to the other clone. However, this body was surrounded by righteousness, without an evil tinge. Crack, crack, crack. All of a sudden, Desolate's motionless body cracked under absolute beginning's tough consciousness control, also finishing his transformation amidst screams and cries. With that, he became the ancient brutal dragon once again. However, he looked frightened when he lifted his head to look at the sky, his dragon body quivering. A crystal-clear stream gushed from absolute beginning's soul pond, drawing a graceful curve in the sky and directly running toward Desolate's dragon head. Just like that, it intruded the soul pond in his sea of consciousness. A mysterious energy of the primitive origin mingled with his soul pond and transformed him in a way he couldn't describe. His body, soul, and spirit were all transformed magically. It was a wonderful feeling that made him almost cry. He finally knew why Sauron and Yuan could have their energy skyrocket. It was a gift from absolute beginning. Desolate finally understood the situation. As Absolute Beginning knew that he couldn't force Desolate, Sauron, and Yuan to get into the Soul Pond, and now Shi Yang's evil clone was here, Absolute Beginning had to implement a new plan to prevent Shi Yang from swallowing them. Absolute Beginning wanted to use Desolate, Yuan, and Sauron to fight Shi Yang. At that moment, Mai Ji had frozen herself, using the ultimate defending technique of her Ice Power Upanishad to seal herself. For the time being, she wasn't affected. In this condition, even if Desolate wanted to kill her, it would take a lot of time and effort. Zi Yarrow was still fighting against Absolute Beginning mentally. Absolute Beginning's consciousness had released Sauron, Desolate, and Yuan, and even gave them a mysterious energy. At this moment, Absolute Beginning only controlled Hui, who couldn't even wiggle right now. Absolute Beginning clearly understood that once Zi Yarrow got rid of the restriction, she would stand on Shi Yang's side. Shi Yang left Mai Ji and noticed Zi Yarrow being alright for the time being, so he didn't mind her much. He decided to help his evil clone in destroying Sauron and Yuan. Freeing Desolate was Absolute Beginning's attack on him. However, nothing was absolute. Even if Absolute Beginning was the ancestor of every creature, the origin of all species, his calculation couldn't be perfect. Harumph. Do you want me to work for you? Do you want to control my fate? In your dreams. Desolate pulled a cold face, grinning oddly. He didn't attack Shi Yang, but waited until the latter had walked into the endless darkness to take action as he furiously attacked Zi Yarrow. As long as I get your Absolute Beginning essence blood, I can take that step to reach the final realm. Desolate became a giant dragon, opening his blood-red mouth. Seizing the chance when Zi Yarrow was struggling against Absolute Beginning's power and Shi Yang had gone to help his evil clone, he swallowed Zi Yarrow. Chapter 1616, Blood Fusion. Chapter 1616, Blood Fusion. Nu. Shi Yang's hoarse cry that had almost torn his lungs echoed out, shaking the void. His host body that should have gone and fused with the evil clone turned and dashed furiously toward Desolate, attempting to hit him hard. Thump, thump, thump. His heart palpitated as his bones and muscles swelled up, vitality rolling in him like rising tides. With his magical space power, he reached the giant dragon in just a split second. The bright star of seas turned into a long chain with countless twinkling stars. That chain conveyed the eternal will of all stars in the sky, which had always been mysterious. At this moment, it looked like a galaxy winding around the colossal dragon. Shi Yang appeared in his giant form, holding the star chain to tie the dragon. His sharp fingernails were like space blades that cut through Desolate's dragon body. Crack, crack. The dragon's body was as tough as iron, but the space blades could break the dragon scales into pieces. Desolate's dragon body with his thick life energy was scaled, bleeding profusely. Go die. Roaring, Shi Yang threw himself into a frenzy of anger. His sharp fingernails were like 10 swords, moving around to cut off pieces of flesh. Arg! Desolate roared hoarsely while his giant body that stretched for billions of miles shook like an earthquake happening inside a mountain range. Different energies with different attributes were erupting from his body, flames burned the sky, tornadoes wreaked havoc, dust gathered into dragons, and sleet twirled. The powers of 5 elements, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, dazzling holy light, harsh gravity, and explosions in mountains and rivers inside Desolate territory had turned into a destructive energy that attacked Shi Yang's Absolute Beginning body. Boom, boom, boom. Shi Yang's body sounded as if he had billions of firecrackers shelling him at the same time, turning his tenacious body gory. Imprisoning life lock. The life soul tree by Desolate's horn suddenly soared up, bringing up the breathtaking life energy. It grew unceasingly, and within a short time, it had become as big as Desolate's dragon body. At the moment Shi Yang's body shattered, the life soul tree suddenly imprinted on his chest like a tattoo. More branches grew, making the life soul tree a wooden cage. Roots, branches, and leaves weaved together, creating a massive and tough net that shrouded Shi Yang entirely. At the moment the life soul tree turned into a massive prison to cage Shi Yang's giant body, it transformed into a monstrous rattan, squeezing hard as if it wanted to cut him and draw his vitality to kill him utterly. The life soul tree was one of the 2 peerless divine weapons that Desolate possessed. In the absolute beginning era, it was because of these two divine weapons that he had become invincible. After the abrasion of perpetual time, these two weapons had become more terrifying as they could even perform the best ability of a power Upanishad, which was unimaginably incredible. Shi Yang's towering body struggled hard amidst the thick, weaving branches of the life soul tree. The more he struggled, the tighter the cage became. Gradually, his situation got really dangerous. After I've digested her and fused with the purest absolute beginning blood, I'm sure I can break the shackle to get to the ultimate realm. Desolate twisted his body, and it seemed as if there were countless mountains and rivers enlarging inside his colossal body, which had created extremely fierce commotions. Zi Yarrow was counterattacking him furiously from inside his stomach. Shi Yang was agitated like he had a flame burning his heart. He wore a grimaced face as he was trying hard to get rid of the life soul tree. He understood that as Zi Yarrow could survive the absolute beginning era, she was one of the most powerful experts, and her absolute beginning blood was the finest. The last ones who stood had indeed collected a lot of absolute beginning blood essence. Zi Yarrow, Devour, and Desolate had sucked a lot of absolute beginning blood essence from their kind to enhance and perfect their bodies and blood. Gradually, they had become extremely intimidating, and their intimidation was actually built on countless skeletons of their own kind. The absolute beginning blood essence in Zi Yarrow's body had blended with dozens of blood essences from her fellows. Thus, if Desolate could absorb her power, his power would be increasing sharply. Compared to Yuan, Zi Yarrow's absolute beginning blood was much more magical and purer. In the absolute beginning era, Yuan hadn't been in the same row with Zi Yarrow, Desolate, and Devour as he didn't have the guts to join the last battle. As a result, he obviously hadn't swallowed much of his fellow's blood. Thus, even after an entirely new era of cultivating and accumulating energy, he was still fearful when he had to face the domineering existences like Desolate, Devour, and Zi Yao. He was still a loser, all because his absolute beginning blood essence hadn't experienced multiple refinements and condensation. It wasn't as powerful as what Desolate, Devour, and Zi Yarrow had. At the same time, his absolute beginning body hadn't developed much. This kind of difference couldn't be made up with just abundant god power. You can't tie me up. Shi Yang had a light flash in his head when he hissed while touching his glabella. The crystal light ball emerged from his tier of power Upanishads, which contained a condensed, milky sea. It was the life power Upanishad origin. As soon as that crystal ball came out, a flow of life power Upanishad origin energy was released. The mysterious, undetectable life energy fluctuated, rippling like waves of water. A flow of will power with Shi Yang's life aura shot out of the life ball, entering the life soul tree. The life soul tree was a divine weapon of the life class, which did have a spirit. It had used Desolate's will to create a soul that listened to Desolate's orders. However, under the effect of the life power Upanishad origin, that soul was puzzled as it found the aura that had just entered having the mark of the life power Upanishad origin. It was a unique aura that it instinctively felt so familiar with, it wanted to become one with that aura. Under that effect, it didn't want to resist at all. The thick branches and leaves that were weaving with each other slowly loosened, and Shi Yang's imprisonment was lifted. The life soul tree then slowly shrank on Shi Yang's chest, seemingly wanting to blend with his heart and become a part of him. Shi Yang had an aura that the tree felt familiar with, which made it proactively attempt to fuse with him. I got it. Shi Yang mumbled to himself while pressing on the life soul tree. With that, countless light dots of vitality emerged and went to the life soul tree. The life soul tree was the divine weapon Desolate had tamed and refined for so many years that it even had a spirit and Desolate soul seal, which meant it was hard to change its ownership. But Shi Yang had some rare or almost unique features. Firstly, he cultivated the life power Upanishad, which originated from Desolate, since he had inherited it from the Grace Mainland's origin. And now, he had obtained the life power Upanishad origin, becoming the only one who controlled the sacred principle of life power Upanishad. But most importantly, he obtained the origins of the Grace Mainland and the God-blessed mainland. The origins of the Grace Mainland and the God-blessed mainland were Desolate's two soul clones. It made Shi Yang possess Desolate's aura and marks, which made the life soul tree assume that Shi Yang was Desolate, its master. Thus, the life soul tree wasn't baffled as it proactively fused with Shi Yang under the life power Upanishad origins guidance. It was a rare coincidence that Desolate's most important divine weapon didn't tie Shi Yang but entered his body, linking with his veins and meridians entirely. Just like that, it had boosted Shi Yang's vitality immediately. God has helped me this time. Shi Yang was cheered up as he felt the sharp increase of life energy in his body. He gathered more energy, using the Skyfall Star River to net Desolate's dragon body. He was using the sharp power of space in the form of blades in the sky, cutting Desolate's body. Almost done. Almost done. In this moment, Desolate was trying his best to refine Xi Yarrow's absolute beginning body. Inside his stomach, Xi Yarrow was using her true body to struggle hard. However, due to absolute beginning's soul consciousness restriction on her soul altar, she couldn't use her power. It gave Desolate the chance to absorb her blood. When the life soul tree had a strange commotion, Desolate was struck dumb, but then understood the situation instantly. Desolate was extremely calm. As soon as he found out what was wrong, he didn't say anything but twisted his body. Just like a dragon soaring up into the sky, he pierced back to the tier of power Upanishads above them. Don't dream of escaping, Shi Yang hissed ear-piercingly. But as soon as he stepped out, a flow of more terrifying soul consciousness struck him. This time, the invasion was like countless lightning dragons intruding his immense sea of consciousness, wreaking havoc in it. Shi Yang clutched his head while crying and howling, his giant body trembled as if he was about to fall. No. Not good. His consciousness has become stronger. He'll be recovering soon. As long as he wakes up, unimaginable catastrophes will happen to every creature in this world including me. Why? Why does he have to help Desolate, Sauron, and Yuan? Why does he have to gift them power so as they can counterattack me? Why? Why? Because accept me, no matter who advances from the territory ancestor realm to the next realm, he will awaken. His evil clone sent him a thought. As soon as this thought emerged, the endless darkness vanished. A massive black hole was swallowing Yuan little by little while Sauron was confined inside a condensed water drop, which was filled with horrible corrosive power. Sauron was being eroded with each passing second. Death would be his final result, and he couldn't escape anymore. Yuan was also an absolute beginning creature, a piece of absolute beginning's memory, and his soul had absolute beginning's mark. Shi Yang's evil clone had turned into a black hole that was using the magical ability of the devouring power Upanishad to suck his absolute beginning blood essence. Instantly, it turned into Shi Yang's blood. During the devouring and refining process of the absolute beginning blood essence, Yuan's pieces of memory had entered the evil clone's head and combined with his memory. With that, a great mystery was slowly revealed. Desolate, Devour, Yuan, and Xi Yarrow had gone through Bloodshed during Absolute Beginning era and collected the Absolute Beginning blood essence, with which their life form evolved, approaching Absolute Beginning's real body. These four existences were parts of Absolute Beginning, created by his incomplete body and soul. The killing game between them would come to an end with the final champion. No matter who was the one that stood to the last moment, that one would get the blood essence from the other three to develop the life form to the acme, which would help him or her break the shackles of the territory ancestor rel. Unfortunately, when it came to that moment, it was also the time every one of them would have to perish completely. As their blood became perfect without any flaw, they would reach Absolute Beginning's level, which meant they would awaken Absolute Beginning. Their incomplete self with errors in their blood and soul would make them themselves. But once their blood was complete and all of Absolute Beginning blood essence was gathered together, they wouldn't be themselves anymore. They would become Absolute Beginning. It was also the time Absolute Beginning would have completely awakened. Chapter 1617 Endless Sorrow. Chapter 1617 Endless Sorrow. __. Sizzle. 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 Sauron screamed pathetically in the erosive fluid as his body was melted, his face festering. Although Sauron and Yuan had received energy from Absolute Beginning, they had already been wounded seriously in the previous fight. Sauron had used Yuan as his flesh shield, and Shi Yang had seized the chance to eat him. Thus, Absolute Beginning's energy couldn't restore Yuan to his peak condition. To control Desolate's fate, Sauron had had half of his fingers broken. Since his fingers were the center of his fate power Upanishad, each of the broken fingers was actually a fatal attack to him. At this moment, his god power was almost drained. Quite the contrary, Shi Yang's evil clone had not only gotten Devour, but also the evil heart. He was in his peak condition, indeed. Devour alone was enough to kill Yuan when the other was in his peak state. And now, with Shi Yang's power, it wasn't a problem to cope with the fallen Sauron and wounded Yuan. Gradually, Sauron was melted completely. The evil clone rose one hand to grab, and he turned into a jet of pure light, entering the clone's acupuncture points. Yuan's giant Absolute Beginning body was swallowed and refined quickly as well. Shi Yang's clone got the refined Absolute Beginning blood essence, mingling it with his blood. As soon as the blood got into him, pieces of memory were gathered. At this moment, Shi Yang understood this mysterious world even more. He saw the true past. Shi Yang clutched his head and screamed while soaring up into the sky. He didn't mind Absolute Beginning's soul suppression, trying to chase after Desolate and rescue Zi Yarrow from Desolate's stomach. Get in. The evil clone looked pensive for a while before turning into a jet of demonic flame, flying up into the sky. The black flame expanded furiously, together with the devouring black hole as it covered half of Yuan's body. Then, Shi Yang and his clone left the Sea of Consciousness, flying up into the upper tier to chase after Desolate. Desolate's giant dragon body shook as he wanted to refine Zi Yarrow's blood faster. At this moment, Zi Yarrow's 12-headed snake was under the attack of many types of exploding energies. The Absolute Beginning symbols of Desolate's extreme greatest extinguishing technique covered her. Sections of the heavenly snake broke, with blood gushing rampantly. Crack it! Shi Yang roared, creating massive space sabers. The middle section of Desolate's dragon body suddenly had a deep and narrow gash as if it was cut by a space mirror. Get out here! The evil clone arrived as well, sucking at the gash. A stream of blood with pieces of meat and broken veins gushed like a river from the sky, rolling Zi Yarrow's human clone out. It's too late. Zi Yarrow was aghast as she turned around to look at Desolate's giant body. He has extracted the blood essence from my body, and I can feel his energy rising. My Absolute Beginning blood essence will perfect his body to the ultimate level, I guess. It's good that your soul won't perish. Even if your soul was taken, turning into images of memory in Absolute Beginning's Sea of Consciousness, I would still can resurrect you. Shi Yang raised a hand to cover Zi Yarrow's body, then opened his immense territory and placed her in there. He turned to look at the glacier and my Ji within it, and did the same to her. He grabbed the entire glacier and placed it into the territory above his head. He understood it now. As long as they were in this universe, Zi Yarrow and my Ji were affected by Absolute Beginning's spirit and consciousness. Being the creatures that were born in this world, they had Absolute Beginning's mark on them. Zi Yarrow and my Ji thus couldn't resist this power, and would lose themselves eventually. Moreover, Zi Yarrow's body was merged with Desolate's body, and Zi Yarrow's human body couldn't help her much. At the same time, Mai Ji was just at the second sky of Territory Ancestor Realm, and she was still weak even though she had obtained the ice power Upanishad origin. If he didn't find them shelter, they would become burden for him in the fight with Desolate. Between the heaven and earth, in this vast sea of stars, the only truly safe place was Shi Yang's territory. It was a brand new and completely independent. It was the world that Absolute Beginning couldn't touch or send his consciousness within to explore. In that world, Shi Yang was the rule-maker, the ancestor of everything. Swoosh, swoosh. Stashing away Zi Yarrow and Mai Ji's glacier, Shi Yang pulled a stern face. The evil clone grinned, dashing and fusing into Shi Yang's body like a blood shadow. Rumble, rumble, boom, boom. The apocalyptic energy arose from that Absolute Beginning body. As he had obtained the blood essence from the evil clone, more pieces of memory came to him. It was Absolute Beginning's memory, the soul seal that was mended. Yeah, the rumor about the Absolute Beginning era is true. He has left seeds to revive himself, as so many pieces of memory were put together along with the marvelous soul consciousness. Shi Yang had a great experience, as if he had traveled through time to witness the mysteries of the absolute beginning era billions of years ago. Power. Endless power. Perfect blood and body. Almost at the same time, Desolate was shaken hard. After he got Hui's blood essence and had absorbed it, his energy had increased sharply. At the same time, from the combination of memory, he knew many secrets in that ancient time. It is so. It is so. Desolate's eyes suddenly had a gleam of sorrow. Did you see it? Shi Yang was now a completely new person. After the evil clone had returned to his host body, he had grown twice as big. The brutal energy from him was so formidable that he could destroy an entire territory with billions of creatures in it with one thought. This kind of an invincible aura was really earth-shaking. Shi Yang grinned while the demonic clouds above his head gathered into many mysterious and silent black holes. However, those black holes seemed extremely mighty, as if they could swallow the world entirely. Abruptly, a powerful suction force arose. In Absolute Beginning's sea of consciousness underneath, Absolute Beginning's soul consciousness moved like grey vortexes of dust, which were created by the memories and soul consciousness of the deceased creatures. Shi Yang's black holes sucked them like a giant whale sucking water before refining them. Strangely, Desolate's giant dragon body hovered in the void, just watching Shi Yang swallow Absolute Beginning's sea of consciousness. He didn't do anything, his eyes bewildered. He seemed to be struggling hard inwardly. Just like Shi Yang, after he got the blood essence, he knew the answer of the riddle of life and saw the unsatisfactory reality. During the Absolute Beginning era, there was a rumor that after one had gathered all the blood essence, he could advance beyond the territory ancestor realm, the ultimate realm. That rumor came from Absolute Beginning himself, a wisp of his undying, scattered soul consciousness that went to each Absolute Beginning creature. It was also the step of his plan to awaken in the future. It was Absolute Beginning's primary idea to guide the Absolute Beginning creatures into killing each other to obtain all of the Absolute Beginning blood essence. During the Absolute Beginning era, as the creatures died, their memories and soul consciousness would return to Absolute Beginning's sea of consciousness. When the creatures in Absolute Beginning era were killed, Absolute Beginning's scattered soul slowly gathered. At that time, the great formation he had prepared in his sea of consciousness would be activated to wake him up. After one more Absolute Beginning creature died, Absolute Beginning's soul would receive one more wisp. And when it had collected a certain amount, Absolute Beginning would be awakened. However, this kind of awakening was only in terms of his soul. In the battle between the Absolute Beginning creatures, Absolute Beginning's blood essence would gather and make the survivors' blood stronger and purer, which would make the survivors more intimidating. If Desolate, Devour, and Hui hadn't fought each other so much that they were all wounded terribly and had to stay dormant for a long time, and if they had had a final champion, whoever it was, Desolate, Devour, or Hui, he or she could have had a chance to take all of the Absolute Beginning blood essence. That would have recovered Absolute Beginning's body. With that would complete his body's awakening. Whether it was the soul or the body, as long as it had been completed, Absolute Beginning would wake up and control the world, giving way to the doomsday for all of the powerful creature. Unfortunately, he had calculated a lot but missed the case where Desolate, Hui, and Devour all failed. Moreover, he hadn't calculated the presence of a coward like Yuan who didn't join the last battle. In the end, the Absolute Beginning era ended without a final champion, and Absolute Beginning's body hadn't been gathered. Since the lucky survivors like Desolate, Devour, Hui, Yuan, and Lizard were all strong soul fragments of Absolute Beginning, their survival had hindered his soul from gathering enough to activate the formation that would wake him up in his sea of consciousness. Consequently, he was forced to stay dormant. While he was sleeping, pieces of memory and wisps of soul consciousness in his sea of consciousness had combined with his soul power from the soul pond to create new lives in many stars in the big territories of this cosmos. Then, Absolute Beginning had to lay his hope on the creatures of the new epoch, wishing for them to wake him up. Just like that, hundreds of millions of years passed in a flash. The experts that had entered the Absolute Beginning gateway were killed, and the great cosmic war finished so many creatures, which helped Absolute Beginning's sea of consciousness to gather more remnants of his soul. Han Tien, Rupert, Serene Prison, and many were dead, their souls returning to his sea of consciousness. Since Yuan had also ambushed and killed Lizard, Absolute Beginning had gathered a lot of wisps of his soul already. The Devouring clan originated from Devour. The destruction of the Devouring clan and Shi Yang swallowing Devour had made more souls return to his sea of consciousness. Finally, Absolute Beginning had achieved the condition of waking up. A wisp of his consciousness had awakened, which was why the experts had to endure the mental invasion. And now, Desolate had obtained Hui's blood essence. But, through the combination of the pieces of memory, Desolate realized Absolute Beginning's plan, thus feeling bewildered and sorrowful. He finally saw it. At the moment he killed Shi Yang and got all of the Absolute Beginning blood essence to enter the ultimate realm he had spent his entire life pursuing, it would also be the moment he would lose himself forever, being replaced by Absolute Beginning. It was Desolate's fate that he couldn't change. It was also the fate of all creatures in this world. No one could change it. He couldn't, Devour couldn't, neither could Yuan, no one could escape this fate. Only Shi Yang could. Anyway, what could he do even if he could foresee his fate? He didn't have the power to resist. He didn't have anything to counter. It was a sorrow that drowned him in desperation. Desolate had to try his best to cope with Shi Yang. If he lost, he would be swallowed by Shi Yang, becoming a part of him. If he won, he would enter the ultimate realm with all the blood essence, and would have to lose himself and become Absolute Beginning. Whether he won or not, there was only death awaiting him. This all left him baffled. Chapter 1618 Eternal Immortal, finished. Chapter 1618 Eternal Immortal, finished. __. The swirling dust arose as flows of memory flooded in while the black holes were swallowing them. Absolute Beginning's soul consciousness ran into Shi Yang's black hole, sending him turbulent, intense memories and thoughts. They were the experiences of innumerable creatures, the foundation of nutrient to create a new soul. Absolute Beginning's soul consciousness was refined by the black hole in Shi Yang's soul altar. His soul pond released a wisp of soul energy to fuse with Absolute Beginning's energy. Together, they formed a mysterious, chaotic, but pure energy, flying up to his vast territory. Deep in that brilliant territory, the chaotic air masses fell on the remote life stars, sinking into the sea. Those were the seeds of life that could grow into new species, the ancestors of the brand new races. As Shi Yang was gathering Absolute Beginning's sea of consciousness and refining the energy to pour more soul energy into his soul pond, the sea of stars in his territory developed more lives and species. They scattered in the most remote areas. Even some isolated planets had received the soul core to develop simple intelligence. He was using Absolute Beginning's soul consciousness to create his own universe with unique lives and races. Meanwhile, Desolate was still baffled. He hovered in the sky, struggling hard in his mind whether to fight or not. Gradually, Absolute Beginning's soul consciousness in the sea of consciousness was swallowed completely. Absolute Beginning's wisp of consciousness that had been just awakened was weakened rapidly, and the energy that covered the world couldn't control things anymore. Boom! All of a sudden, the mental attack aimed at Shi Yang's head blended with all of Absolute Beginning's remaining soul consciousness, shooting hard in Desolate's head and entering his soul altar like a giant cosmic artillery. Desolate's mind was struck while he was still bewildered, causing him to panic instantly. Swoosh! 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 In the void of the tier of power Upanishads, countless magical power Upanishad origins looking like a fireball or a tornado, a dark thunderstorm, or even a luxuriant forest, suddenly fell and entered Desolate's soul altar and sea of consciousness. Those power Upanishad origins had different attributes as they were the principles of natural power Upanishads. They were the cores that had been hibernating and hadn't been absorbed yet. At this moment, they reigned like falling stars, entering Desolate's tier of power Upanishads. All the keys power Upanishads had come to Desolate, helping him understand many other power Upanishads, which improved his marvelous realm one more time. Coming with the power Upanishad origins was the pure soul energy from Absolute Beginning's soul pond. That soul power had turned into a stream, pouring into Desolate's brain and soul pond. A soul-tearing agony flooded Desolate's brain, making him cry and roar hoarsely, his voice shaking the entire place. Since Desolate had seen his fate, he knew no matter what he chose, he was at a dead end. Thus, he could only feel desperate and sorrowful. He knew that even if he could kill Shi Yang, he would wake up absolute beginning in the end, which would make him lose himself. Thus, he was so bewildered, leaving his soul defenseless. That was why absolute beginning could find a chance to attack him. In Desolate's immense sea of consciousness, a vague shadow created by the pure soul energy slowly emerged above the soul pond. That vague shadow was tall, with an imposing and overbearing aura as if he had just arrived from hell. As soon as he materialized, he floated up high in Desolate's soul pond while howling. Desolate's dragon body twisted hard as he roared and cried in agony. It was really scary, as if he was facing absolute death. In Desolate territory, which was Desolate's root, strange jets of bloodlight shot out. The bloodlights entered Desolate's sea of consciousness, congregating toward that vague shadow. With that, the shadow became clearer. It was an overbearing man with the body of a sturdy demon. However, he looked so strange with long, red blood hair, and a pair of bloodthirsty, crimson eyes. Then, hovering above Desolate's soul pond, he grinned. So, this is how it is. Bloodthirsty. Seeing the man, Desolate discolored in fright, and couldn't help but scream in fear. Right after that, Desolate understood it and screamed, "No wonder you could get all of Devour's power Upanishads and hit him hard enough to make him dormant. No wonder you could reach the territory ancestor realm right inside my territory. You had almost killed me. Turns out you're him. You're the soul he had created in a sober moment. If you had successfully killed him and finished me, you would have been awakened earlier, right? It's really bad, isn't it? Unfortunately, the shackle in my soul has just been lifted at this moment. Otherwise, what did you have to kill me once? If I had my consciousness and memory, all of you would have helped me refine my body to recover quickly. But because of the competition between you and Devour, I had to sleep for several thousand years more. Lucky me. The seed I planted at the moment my body broke and my soul shattered has sprouted and become a towering tree that can shade all of you. I can't believe that the sapling from another universe has become so tough that it can even threaten me after growing over a long time." Bloodthirst's demonic, giant body had materialized in Desolate's sea of consciousness. Afterward, he said indifferently, "You're unlucky this time as you've entered my sea of consciousness. My awakening is your biggest misfortune." While talking, Bloodthirsty floated up, crossing the tier of power Upanishads and Desolate territory to run directly toward Desolate's host soul. Bloodthirsty rose one hand, and an ethereal hand with countless powers, including sun, moon, star, metal, wood, water, fire, earth, lightning, gravity, space, etc., gripped Desolate's dragon soul, shoving it into his mouth and swallowing it. Almost at the same time, Desolate's millions of miles-long body suddenly shriveled as if his spirit, soul, blood, bones, and flesh were sucked away. Desolate's immensely vast vitality was like an ancient tree that had lived perpetually, and eventually drying and withering as it came to the end of its life. A flow of aura that could frighten people came from Desolate's withering body. The mysterious but horrible energy made Shi Yang pale in fear, although he was swallowing absolute beginning's sea of consciousness. What has happened? He couldn't help but turn to Desolate, his face changing greatly as a feeling of extreme danger rose in his heart. Soon, Shi Yang recognized the danger. His massive body formed from his host body and the evil clone suddenly emitted a destructive energy fluctuation. He dashed toward Desolate while space, star, life, devouring, and 8 evil powers were released at the same time. Countless space sabers slashed and a starlight net was cast from the sky. A giant hand of life energy pulled and tore while negative energies exploded. 8 blood-dripping islands flew everywhere while Shi Yang's body tore and bit Desolate's body. "My eye!" An ancient voice came from the withering dragon's body. As Shi Yang's energy hit it, the dragon seemed to have only its skin left, while the blood and flesh inside had disappeared. Right when Shi Yang discovered the wrong situation, the power Upanishad symbol tower he had fused with suddenly exploded. Countless absolute beginning symbols flew away like butterflies, flying toward the dragon head. As soon as the power Upanishad symbol tower exploded, a massive eye emerged, also flying toward the dragon's head. Boom! Boom! Desolate's dragon head burst off, and so did his body. A giant demon that was as big as Shiyang and somehow looked similar in appearance emerged in the middle of the explosion, between the hazy absolute beginning's soul consciousness swirls. This giant demon was extremely overbearing and good-looking. His body looked as if it was made of many planets, carrying traces of the ancient times. The eye from the Power Upanishad symbol tower fell on the forehead of the demon, becoming his third eye. The aura of this demon was much more immense and intimidating than Desolate's. Seems like I've seen him before. Looking at the creature that suddenly came out of Desolate's body, Shiyang had a familiar feeling. He remembered clearly that when he broke the barriers inside the blood vein ring, he had vaguely seen this domineering figure. However, the demon in his impression didn't have the third eye. Bloodthirsty. Bloodthirsty. A light of realization crossed his head as Shiyang couldn't help but scream hoarsely, his face extremely odd. The giant demon that had torn Desolate's body to get out had bloodthirsty appearance. Besides the third eye, there was nothing different between them. Haven't gotten it yet? Bloodthirsty grinned while walking toward Shiyang. The endless sea of consciousness was like wisps of smoke that entered his pores. The absolute beginning soul pond flew out, entering his head through the third eye on his forehead. So, you are him. Shiyang finally understood as he recovered his sound mind. All the riddles in his head were solved. Why was Bloodthirsty so intimidating? How could he hit Devour so hard that the other had to stay dormant? Why didn't Hui dare to provoke him? Why could his ring make Shiyang pierce through space to get to the dark forest? All of his questions were answered, because Bloodthirsty was absolute beginning. Bloodthirsty stepped forward, and the soul consciousness in the sea of consciousness vanished, while all the Power Upanishad origins in the tier of Power Upanishads entered his head. He was recovering his power rapidly. Billions of years ago, I woke up from chaos. I built up the world, creating creatures. While doing that, I found your universe. It was totally different from mine. However, that universe had an unimaginably powerful barrier that I couldn't break to intrude. I tried to get in, wasting a lot of my energy in doing that. Bloodthirsty spoke while walking. Unfortunately, at the moment I finally opened the barrier, I had fallen into bedevilment and got struck due to my significant consumption of energy in opening the new world and creating the planets, creatures, as well as opening the barrier. My body and soul slowly split up. But before my consciousness vanished, I tried to pull out one soul from that universe. It was you. If I hadn't fallen into bedevilment, and my body and soul didn't split up to form the absolute beginning creatures, I could have dragged you into my world in just a blink of an eye. But, when I pulled you out of your world, I was extremely weak, and couldn't take care of you. Then, I was completely divided, losing myself, which took you several billion years, 2 eras, to travel from your universe to my universe. Before my soul consciousness vanished, I had prepared for my awakening. The rumor in the absolute beginning era was my first deed. As long as the creatures in absolute beginning era were all gone, it would trigger my protocol to wake up in the sea of consciousness, and my soul would have been gathered. As long as Desolate, Devour, Hui, Yuan, and Lizard killed each other until only one of them survived, my body would have revived as well. If my soul or body had woken up, I could awaken completely. But what a pity that Desolate, Devour, and Hui were all wounded and went dormant. Moreover, Yuan and Lizard didn't join that battle. Hence, I couldn't awaken, so my soul continued sleeping. However, my sea of consciousness continued to move. The remnant souls and pure soul energy of the absolute beginning creatures had created new lives and races, starting a new era, in which Desolate had wanted to create a new life due to the continuous battle against Devour. At that moment, I had created Bloodthirsty. I woke up for a split moment, which was why we got the bold and fierce Bloodthirsty. But, my embodiment didn't know who he actually was until he died. I couldn't wake up. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many complications by now. The soul mark of my embodiment had an important piece of my memory. He knew that the territory ancestor controlled the entire territory. With his instincts, he wanted to escape. Before he died, he had used his secret technique to touch Desolate's origin and bring an alien soul from another territory. It was by chance that your soul was dragged into Desolate territory after so many years. I can only say that I can't control everything. At least, I can't control your soul. So, I let you take the devouring power Upanishad. And, because of your soul's unique features, all the energy and souls you had swallowed belong to you. They wouldn't return to my sea of consciousness. Eventually, they made you rise, and you even obtained the power to threaten me. Absolute Beginning stopped talking and walking at the same time, as all the wisps of soul consciousness in the sea of consciousness had entered his body, including the soul pond. Absolute Beginning's tier of power Upanishads didn't have any power Upanishad origin left. The sea of consciousness now didn't have a wisp of soul consciousness, only a dark void. It's time to finish. Looking at Shi Yang, Absolute Beginning wore an indifferent face. I will kill you and get back the energy you've stolen from me to recover my full power. I'll come to your universe to conquer it. And, I'll use your universe as the bridge to go to another universe. Shi Yang was shaken hard as the mysteries unfolded. Are you sure you will win? Shi Yang got a hold of himself instantly. Starlight beams moved across his head, cutting off his flustered, panicked thoughts. Shi Yang resumed his cold and calm face, sneering. You're not complete right now, and lack a lot of things. For example, the life power Upanishad origin, the space power Upanishad origin, the star power Upanishad origin, and the evil heart created by the evil thoughts in your heart. Of course, we also have to take into account at least half of your blood essence. Shi Yang had used the Absolute Beginning body to swallow Devour, Yuan, and a part of Desolate. This body of his almost had half of the blood essence and the enormous life energy from Absolute Beginning, added with the devouring power Upanishad origin and the evil heart. In this moment, he wasn't weaker than Absolute Beginning. Even if I'm not complete, it's enough to destroy you. Then, I will use you to recover fully, Absolute Beginning said relaxedly. While he was talking, the endless abyss collapsed. The immense universe, countless territories, their stars, and galaxies above the endless abyss, all pressed down. Absolute Beginning wanted to use the power of an entire universe to kill Shi Yang and perish his soul. This wasn't just desolate territory. It was the real universe. It was the vastly immense sea of stars created by billions of territories like the sea domain of nihility, desolate territory, wavy river star area, cloud mist territory. The majestic aura of the universe contained thousands of power Upanishads, like the 5 elements, the stars, life, gravity, tornado, and lightning. Crack, crack, crack. The void was like a crushed stone, which cracked before turning into fine dust. No existence, ethereal or real, could resist that horrible threat. Their soul marks were erased instantly. Ah! Shi Yang faced the sky and roared as his giant body felt like it was stabbed by tens of thousands of swords. Numerous bleeding holes appeared on his body, and his soul altar had cracks as if billions of sharp blades had just slashed it. It's not just you who can do that. Shi Yang pointed at the sky, and the universe in his soul altar emerged. The immense universe was so brilliant. Although it looked like a massive projection in the void, it wasn't just a hologram, it was real. That universe had many planets with countless mountain ranges, lakes, and seas. It was borderless, sheltering the ancestors of many species. It had everything a real universe had. The 2 universes, one above and the other below, were pressing down and pushing up at the same time, and just like that, they collided hard. Boom, 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 crack, crack, thump, 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 thump. Countless explosions reverberated with the absolute destruction of creatures and the complete obliteration of suns, moons, stars, spaces, and territories. Shi Yang and Absolute Beginning's universes were shattering fiercely, and the creatures living there were dragged into the tide of the doomsday. They were helpless and hopeless, killed in an instant. Fall. Absolute Beginning's face was as cold as it could get. The magical lands with countless creatures of the 7 great clans suddenly aimed at Shi Yang's universe, as if they wanted to bring eternal emptiness, loneliness, and coldness to Shi Yang's universe to destroy him utterly. Many territories in Absolute Beginning's universe seemed to turn into power Upanishad origins. They had transformed into flames, glacier, lightning bolts, electric dragons, meteor showers, and other brutal attacks to bombard Shi Yang's universe furiously. Many sections of Shi Yang's new universe's borders were exploding under the formidable attacks. His universe seemed about to shrink and become a small dot before vanishing completely. Sizzle. 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 Even his soul altar was attacked by absolute beginning once again. High waves rose in his sea of consciousness while the tranquil soul pond seethed anxiously and the soul fluid was about to splash. Shi Yang's unbreakable body crackled as his bones were broken and internal organs were displaced. Blood sprinkled out of him. It was a soul-sinking attack, indeed. He could feel his territory, soul, sea of consciousness, and body being attacked wholly. It felt like giant hammers were pounding on him continuously. They hammered his soul and body, throwing him into a terrifying agony he couldn't bear. It seemed like he would collapse in the next moment, and all of his traces in this world would be erased. You got half of my power and you control my source of evil. But, do you think you can defeat me? Absolute beginnings consciousness attacked him, causing tremendous noises to flood and explode inside his head. They were even more intense than the world-obliterating lightning bolts and thunderclaps. A half of your power, a half of your body. So, everything you can control, I can, too. At the moment Shi Yang's soul was about to burst off, he faced the sky and roared, his voice tearing the barriers between heaven and earth, piercing through many universes. Your universe. It has a part of me. But, you can't touch my universe. A flow of tough will with the incredible fixation wound around Shi Yang's head, forming a terrifying tornado that barged into Absolute Beginning's universe abruptly. Immediately, it developed into a massive spiderweb, reaching every corner of Absolute Beginning's universe and pinning it down. Melt for me. All of a sudden, Shi Yang's immense universe changed greatly, turning into an incredibly large black hole and revolving crazily. There were many territories, including the sea domain of nihility, that had jumped into Shi Yang's universe and attacked his world. But in that instant, they were swallowed by the black hole. At the same time, the life soul tree in Shi Yang's heart boiled furiously, granting him the invincible, unique power. This flow of immense vitality recovered his wounded body while all the blood that he had shed gathered and returned to his body. Shi Yang's universe now was a black hole that had covered many territories and the entire sea domain of nihility. His body was shouting and roaring as he was frantically tearing and biting Absolute Beginning in bloodthirst's shape. The sharp fingernails swung, and the massive space sabers slashed bloodthirst's chest, making him bleed horribly. Shi Yang had almost fallen into a demonic frenzy. An evil and ruthless aura emitted from him as he opened his giant mouth to chew and tear Absolute Beginning's flesh. He swallowed Absolute Beginning's blood and flesh altogether. No. Impossible. You can't tie my universe. Absolute Beginning's universe-shaking voice arose in fright. Half of my soul and body came from you, and the other half is formed from your evil fixations. That's why I can control your world. And you've never taken a wisp of my soul. You don't have the right to control me. You had tied yourself. Destruction is your destiny. Shi Yang roared crazily as he was wilding, hitting and assaulting Absolute Beginning. His mouth sank into Absolute Beginning's chest with the saw-like teeth, biting and swallowing the other's flesh. After the refining process of 720 acupuncture points, his energy expanded unceasingly. With the devouring power Upanishad origin and the evil heart, Shi Yang controlled the ultimate devouring ability. While fighting, he was using the devouring power Upanishad to eat Absolute Beginning's blood and flesh. Thus, the more he fought, the stronger he became. Quite the contrary, Absolute Beginning was eaten and getting weaker constantly. His universe was tied down, each of the territories, continents, seas, and mountains were slowly pulled into Shi Yang's universe. As Shi Yang's was eating and drinking Absolute Beginning's flesh and blood while swallowing Absolute Beginning's universe, his brand new universe was also expanding at a speed naked eyes could observe, growing crazily. As Shi Yang's thought changed, he noticed that the continents and territories weren't dissolved after they went through the devouring black hole in a magical way. For example, the Heavenly Rock continent, the Cloud Mist territory, the territories of the mysterious Sky Clan, Phantom Clan, and Whitebone Clan had gone through the vortex unharmed. They had fallen into the swelling universe underneath, becoming a part of the new universe. None of the creatures living there were harmed or killed during the process. However, they were baffled because they didn't know where they were. Anyway, the lands, territories, and lifestars he didn't pay attention to or had his enemies in them shattered entirely at the moment they fell into the devouring vortex. All of the dwellers became dust in just a blink, sucked and drawn into Shi Yang's sea of consciousness. After he got the soul energy from the soul pond, they could turn into new creatures, new species. Time flew by hurriedly. After an unknown amount time, Absolute Beginning's extremely colossal body had stopped wiggling as Shi Yang had sucked all of his blood essence, turning it into pure blood in his veins and the immense energy in his body. The body, soul, flesh, even hair, everything will be the foundation to create new lives. I will extract the memory of Han Tien, Montesi, Hero, Emperor Sea Shark, and Dracula to revive them. Then, Shi Yang hurled Absolute Beginning's dried body into the massive black hole. Shi Yang extracted the memory of Han Tien and the other deceased experts, using his soul energy to resurrect them in his new universe. At the moment Absolute Beginning's universe completely disappeared into the black hole and Absolute Beginning's body was thrown there as well, Shi Yang found himself hovering in an absolute void. There was no sky, earth, sun, moon, star, or mountain and river. Only everlasting darkness and the borderless void. My universe, the one I was born in, where is it? My soul has traveled for billions of years to get here. Today, would that universe still be existing or not? Has it vanished? Perhaps, after I'm done with refining all the energy, souls, thoughts, and blood, I could try to explore and find it. Well, it will be a very long, long time later. In the absolute void, Shi Yang sat down cross-legged like a god. A brand new universe hovered above his head as he was urging his power to complete his new world, creating new creatures and species, giving them lives and souls. He would become their ancestors, an eternal immortal. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.